that we know how to conduct ourselves among people as we live each day by. The other day I was thinking, and this phrase came into my mind: "The heart wants what it wants." I've heard that all my life, and it kept on coming over and over and over. So I Googled it to find out just where it had a place today. And when I did, this young lady came up, Selena Gomez. I think she must be popular because when I Googled it, it was everywhere. I guess she is popular by the way people are laughing. So I looked at the lyrics of the song, and some of them I wasn't surprised to see. But here's one of the stanzas. Save your advice, 'cause I won't hear. You might be right, but I don't care. There's a million reasons why I should give you up, but the heart wants what it wants. And then it repeats itself 3 times. This occurs, I think, 4 times in the song, which makes a total of 16 times, saying because the heart wants what it wants. If you look closely at the words, you can see an attitude that pretty much permeates our society today. Notice that she says, you might be right. Well, the implication of that is she might be wrong. Apparently she's got her a boyfriend or something, a man, and he's trying to get her to stay away from him. And she says, you might be right, which means she might be wrong. She thinks she ought to be with him, but she might be wrong. But even though she might be wrong, I don't care. I don't care if I'm wrong. Okay? Because the heart wants what it wants. Right or wrong becomes irrelevant in popular thinking because the heart wants what it wants. And we hear that all the time in a variety of different ways. I don't know that this young lady really understands the words of the song that she's singing. Sometimes we just hear a snappy tune and we like it. But the fact of the matter is, when we hear things like that, it does become a part of us. We are what we think, and we think what we hear. Therefore, as people hear music such as this, or television programming, or whatever the case may be, that philosophy more or less rubs off on people, and they start thinking that it's reasonable. It's a reasonable philosophy. After all, the heart wants what it wants. Right or wrong. Who makes up right or wrong? The heart wants what it wants, and a person should be happy. That's after all what it's all about, right? Happiness. If we're not happy, then what's it all for? So whatever the heart dictates, that's what a person is supposed to do, regardless of whether the thing is right or wrong. That means you put feelings over intelligence. If you think about it spiritually, as the Bible would address the matter, it's putting the flesh over the spirit. And for Christians, we know that that's a big mistake. The flesh is not supposed to drive the spirit. The spirit is supposed to drive the flesh. The spirit is the mind, the thinking part of man. You and I are composite beings. A body without a spirit, if it could exist, would be like a dog or a cow or whatever. It would be governed by its lusts. Whatever the flesh lusted for, that's what it would do, just like animals do. Just be another animal. But put the spirit, that's made in the image of God, put the spirit in the body and it becomes entirely different. Now the spirit, the intellectual part, the part that can think, the part that can reason, the part that can draw rational conclusions, the part that can say, hey, this is wrong. This isn't good. If I do this, this is what's going to happen, and that will be bad. That part of man gets shut down because the heart wants what it wants. And this is what we're told. We hear it from the White House all the way down. It's very old. I get so tired of listening to it, but it's always about what makes a person happy. That's what's important. You and I are made in the image of God, and we're not to be governed by mere physical desire. We're supposed to be governed by our thinking, our being in the image of God. We have the attributes of God in the sense of our being able to reason and draw rational conclusions. When we look at a situation and we analyze it, a little girl wants a boyfriend, and this boyfriend is known far and wide for his sexual prowess. And the little girl, she thinks in her mind, I can bring him under control, because she's so crazy about him. She loves him so much. And she thinks, I want him, and even though I know the things I know, I'm going to have him anyway. Chances are she's going to wind up in trouble. There's a lot of problems that occur because people are governed by their fleshly emotions rather than the gray matter God put between our ears. And it's very, very sad to see that happen. King Solomon in Ecclesiastes 12 verse 1 said, "Remember now your Creator." Remember Him now. Now is the time to remember your Creator. The Bible frequently speaks about the importance of today. Today, the Hebrew author said in chapter 4 and verse 7. Today, if you will hear God's voice, do not harden your heart. When a person hears the voice of God and they say no, they are hardening their heart towards God. Their stance becomes a little stiffer. The determination becomes a little greater to say no to God again. So today, do something about it right now. Because if you don't, you're going to harden your heart just a wee bit more against God. And in Hebrews chapter 6 and verse 4, we're told that we can't harden our hearts to the point that it becomes impossible for us to repent. And that is so sad. Well, someone says, I thought God would always forgive. God will always forgive. But the question is, can a person repent? I've seen a lot of people in old age, all men, who just flat out told me to my face that they were unable to repent. I know if I lived again, I would do it the same way. They know in their heart that they're not sorry about what they've done. They know in their heart that they would live the same life they lived because there was no room in their heart for sorrow or sadness or a chance to correct and make right their wrongs. And it's always been so sad because I've watched men with tears in their face because they were trying to be as honest as possible. They just could not repent, and it was so sad to watch. Remember now, right now, your Creator. It's an urgent matter. And Solomon will say at the end of the same chapter, let us hear conclusion of the whole matter. He's talking about this matter of life. That's what he's been talking about throughout the book, is life, what it's all about, what's it good for. Solomon tried everything under the sun, and he said it's all vanity. It's all vanity. It's all for nothing. Because when everything's said and done, you wind up with nothing anyway. When you die, even though you're rich, you die the same way a poor man dies. There is nothing in death. You're on the same ground. Everything I achieved, everything I acquired, everything I did, vanity. Vanity of vanity, says the preacher. Over and over and over he would say. And then after all this living, the aged king said, let us hear what I've concluded about this whole matter we call life. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is man's all. This is what I've discovered. that this is man's purpose. This is man's reason for being. What was it, Solomon? To fear God and keep his commandments. That's why God created us. That's why he gave us life. That is the number one reason we're here. And if we don't understand and fulfill that purpose, we discover some sad days coming. For God will bring every work into judgment, including everything that's secret that we hide, whether good or evil. It'll all come out into the open. There's a day of judgment coming, he's saying, and we're going to be judged by what we've done, whether good, whether evil, whether we've hid it, whether it was out in the open. It doesn't matter because the Lord knows all. In the day of the judgment, everything is put on the table, and God judges us accordingly. Therefore, he says, remember now your Creator, today. Remember now, in the days of your youth, in the days of your innocence, before your heart becomes hardened, before your heart becomes filled with so many bad memories, before your heart becomes tough to the various things you're going to have to face in your life. Now, spend your time coming to know your Creator while you're not bothered with all this other things that older people are. Now, before the difficult days come, that's the days of the trials, the tests, the temptations. We get to a point in age where life is one series of difficulties that we find ourselves having to deal with. We're busy, busy, busy trying to handle all the problems we encounter. Therefore, today, now, while you're young, in your innocence, remember your Creator, because those difficult days are going to demand that you make a decision, and you want to be capable of making the right decision. So now is the time. Now, before the years draw near, when you say, I have no pleasure in them. Sin, guilt, and shame is what we're filled with. Many of us are filled with sin, guilt, and shame. We don't talk about it. I don't talk about it. There's a lot of things I'm ashamed of that's been done in my life. There are a lot of things I'll never tell you about because I don't want you to know that stuff. I wished I didn't know it myself. But of all the things I forget, this is the stuff I just can't forget because I hate it so very much. It shames me so very much. I'm so embarrassed by some of the things that I've done, and you got to live with it now because you did it. So now, right now, today, before it gets worse, remember your Creators, because as time progresses, it only gets more and more challenging. In the 119th Psalm in verse 9, the king of Israel, David, said, how can a young man cleanse his way? And I think this is something all of us think about. Here we are, we're trying to live the right life. We're trying to do the things that God would have us to do. And regardless of how much effort we put into it, regardless of how much of ourself we put into it, we find from time to time we miss the mark, we sin. I want to do something that I'm not supposed to do, but I want to do it anyway. And you know, the heart wants what it wants. It may not be right. Well, I know it's not right, but the heart wants what it wants. I've got this feeling to be happy. I've got to do this thing. We deal with these issues. How can I make my way clean? How can I prepare myself to deal with these various situations? This might be the words of a young man, but it's the same thoughts of an aged man. In Romans 7:15, the Apostle Paul, he was arguing basically the same dilemma. He didn't understand why a man who wanted to be a godly man was doing so many sinful things. He said, what I am doing, I do not understand. I don't know why I'm doing it. I'm doing what I'm not supposed to do. Paul, why are you doing it? I don't know why I'm doing it. I wished I did. I don't understand. We know what it was. It was the flesh winning over the spirit. But he didn't understand why he was doing things he didn't want to do. What I will to do, what I want to do, I don't do it. I don't practice it. And the thing that I hate, that's the thing I do. What's wrong with me? That's what's going through his mind. He calls himself a wretched man. He calls himself a chief of sinners because he doesn't understand. There's a part of him that wants to do good. There's a part of him that wants to do bad. And sometimes the bad outweighs the good. Why am I that way? How can a young man cleanse his way? Well, the psalmist goes on to say he can take heed according to the word of God. That is, he be attentive to what God has said. Follow God's instructions. Follow God's rules. If you want to make your way easier, if you want to make your way lighter, follow God's rules, because that'll be the easier way to walk than the way we sometimes choose to walk. If we were to ask Paul this question, how can a young man cleanse his way? This might very well be his answer. Walk in the Spirit. Because if you walk in the Spirit, you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. There are two entities involved here that the apostle speaks about, the flesh and the Spirit. The Spirit, of course, is to walk after the Holy Spirit, to follow his teachings, to follow the roadmap, if you will, from here to heaven. Walk in the Spirit, and you won't be fulfilling those lusts that come up in the flesh. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, the pride of life. If you walk in the Spirit, it'll take your mind off these other things because you're concentrating on walking in the Spirit. And then he goes on to explain our problem. It's intelligence over feelings. The world's telling us it's feelings over intelligence. The Bible tells us it's intelligence over feelings. We've got to use our minds. We've got to use our understanding and realize and know that the best way is the divine way. The other road is the road to hell. For the flesh, he says, lusts against the Spirit. How about this? For the feelings, lusts against the intelligence. Intelligence says one thing. The feeling says the heart wants what it wants. Okay? So the feelings lust against intelligence, or the Spirit, the intelligence lusts against the feelings. The flesh, the Spirit, they are at odds with one another. They are contrary to one another. They butt heads. They fight each other. And so that you do not do the things that you wish. There's a battle that rages within us all. It's the Battle of Armageddon. We hear so much talk about the Battle of Armageddon, a great battle that's going to take place one day. The Battle of Armageddon takes place every day. 7 billion times a day. Every one of us is fighting the Battle of Armageddon. It's the battle of the flesh against the Spirit. The Spirit against the flesh. And the outcome is going to determine our eternal destinies. It's the greatest battle of all time. What's going to win? The Spirit within us or the flesh? Because we're in a constant state of turmoil, trying to overcome both of them at the same time. If you are led by the Spirit, he concludes, you are not under the law. Most Bible scholars say the law here in this place is the law of Moses. That's not what the man is talking about. I don't believe when he makes reference to the law, I think Paul is talking about a law that maybe they haven't considered yet. Notice the context, especially verse 16 and 17. Walk in the Spirit, you will not fulfill the lust of the flesh. Bang, bang, bang. Why? For the flesh, it lusts against the Spirit. The Spirit, it lusts against the flesh. And the flesh and the Spirit are contrary to one another. What is the battle? It's the battle between the flesh and the Spirit. It doesn't take a Solomon to see it. It's a battle between the flesh and the Spirit. So what is verse 18 saying? If you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law of the flesh. That's the context he's talking about. And that's what you and I are supposed to do. If we want to overcome, if we want to cleanse our way, if we want to do what the Lord would have us to do, then we are to follow the things of the Spirit and not allow the heart to do what it wants to do. We're to think. When all things are said and done, what do we want? When all things are said and done, where do we want to be? What's our ultimate goal? What's our chief aim? What are we driving for? If it's heaven, then make sure we're successful. And if it's not heaven, well then follow your heart. It'll take you wherever it is you're headed anyway. But it's a battle between the flesh and the spirit. Young people need to understand that. Because there's so much emphasis today on doing the things of the heart, following the desires that you have. Everybody has desires, and most of the time we find out that our desires are not right. They're wrong. Satan tempts us to do evil and sin against God. A great obstacle that stands in all of our way. It's an obstacle that most of us don't want to admit, and that is fear. There's no fear. That's the slogan, right? No fear. You know, I'd like to see if there's anybody that actually believes that. No fear. The only person that could have no fear would be a person that had something wrong with them chemically. Something's wrong with their DNA. There's something that's keeping them from being rational. Because anybody's going to have fear that's got it all together. Fear is a part of life. When I was a kid, I wouldn't have admitted it for $1,000. But I did most of the stuff I did because I was afraid. I was afraid to be looked at as a sissy. I was afraid people would think I was a chicken. And rather than being called a sissy or a chicken, I did what people wanted me to do. And I got in trouble. And I did things that makes me very ashamed today. The heart wanted what it wanted. What was it it wanted? It wanted to be accepted. What we fear, most of all, I do believe, is rejection. Every area of life, we fear rejection. We don't want people to not like us. We don't want people to not want to be around us. We want people to accept us into their group. And we do what we have to do to find that acceptance. Whether you're looking for the opportunity to be with the people you want to be with, whether you're looking for an opportunity to get a girl or a boy to go on a date with you, or if you're looking for an opportunity to get you a spouse, a wife, a husband, we're afraid. We're afraid it ain't going to happen. And because of our fears, we let our emotions take control. We do things we wouldn't otherwise do. Christians have fear just like everybody else. And teenage Christians have fear. There's no such thing as a person with a right mind that doesn't have fear. You may not admit it, but if I look at you and you're still breathing, I know you're afraid of things. Because all of us are. We all have fear. Why do teenagers abuse drugs? You know, we know so much about drugs and what's happened. How many times have we seen a prom that ended up like this? Some kid strode underneath the car. Or perhaps one that ended up like that. A young lady laying out on the hood of her car. And this was on prom night. A big night. Graduation from high school. Big night. Been working for 18 years. Big night. Went out and got her some fancy clothes. Went to the prom, put a little flower on her wrist. Her family took pictures of her before she left home. They all kissed each other. They were happy, happy, happy. And the next picture you see, the child is laying up on the hood of a car. Why? Because of drugs. Using drugs. These children know this is going to happen, and they use that junk anyway. Just like we did. Why? Because they're afraid. Afraid not to. Afraid people won't like us. Afraid people won't accept us. You got to be with a group. Peer pressure. according to psychologists and the like, peer pressure is the greatest pressure that teenagers face. But I don't think it's just teenagers. You know, I'm in my 60s now, and peer pressure is still something we experience. It doesn't change. It doesn't go away. We may become a little bit more hard-headed, but we feel the effects of peer pressure. A child that's been scorned, other ones sitting over there talking about her, whispering, mimicking. And what is the girl? The girl, her heart's broken. She feels bad. She feels sad. What has she done wrong? Nothing. What have they done? They're just being mean to her. There are three girls that get into a huddle, and they talk about this little girl like something's the matter with her. And I guess it makes them feel good, and it makes her feel like a dog, and they don't really care. So what do you do? What do you do when you're the outcast? What do you do when you're the one that's not in the circle? Well, a lot of times people do whatever they have to do to become a member of a circle. We join folks. We engage in activities we wouldn't normally engage in. We do stuff we wouldn't normally do because we want people to accept us. We want people to like us. And if we're lucky, we wind up in jail. Because that may just be what it takes to slap us, wake us up, and see what we're doing to ourselves. Drugs, we all know it's a rampant problem today. Why are teenagers using all these drugs? They're afraid. If they don't, so-and-so won't like me. I want to be liked. I won't be able to hang out over at Joe's house where all the guys go and shoot hoops because they also smoke pot. They drink alcohol. If you don't do that, they won't want to be with you. Children doing things they don't want to do because they're afraid. They allow their fear. They allow their heart to have what it wants, even though they know it's not the way to go. And it is so sad that it happens. Overcoming fear. Such a hard thing to do. Oh, boy. Such a hard thing to do. I never did it. Not till I became a man. Not till I became a grown man. I allowed fear to drive me for years because I was afraid of not being accepted. And I did a lot of stuff because I thought I had to do it. And I was proving how much courage I actually had. And now I can look back and realize courage, nothing. It was fear driving me to do it. I was afraid. Afraid of being rejected. And fear has a terrible hold on us. The only way I know to overcome fear is by desire. Okay, now you can call desire whatever you want to call it. You can call it the will, you can call it love, you can call it hate, you can call it faith. Whatever you want to call it, it's all about desire. Faith is a desire to please God. The will is a desire to do what I know is the right thing to do. Love is a desire to make my wife happy, to make her feel fulfilled. It's all connected to desire. You got desire, you got fear. And when fear is greater than desire, fear is going to win out. We're going to be governed by our fear. But if our desire is greater than our fear, then our desire is going to win out. Because the Spirit will overcome the flesh. Or the flesh will overcome the Spirit. It depends on which one is the greatest. When we think about all the things we care about, we have friends. What kind of a friend do I want to have? Do I want to have the kind of a person who mocks other people? Do I want to have the kind of a friend who puts other people down or pushes other people around? Do I want to have the kind of a friend that I have to wear certain clothes in order to be accepted? Is this the kind of a friend I want to have? And if so, why do I want such a friend? Why would I want a friend who makes demands of me that are contrary to my nature or my way? Well, I know why. It's because of fear. The question is, what kind of a friend do you want? You ought to know the kind of a friend you want. And that ought to be the kind of a friend you try to hook up with. Don't worry about the rest. Don't fool with the rest. They don't matter. They don't count. They don't live in your world. You live in your own world. As a child of God, you live in the world of a Christian. Don't worry about the world's world. It doesn't matter. Find those who are more akin to you. Evil company corrupts good habits, we're told, and that's true. If you start running like the wolves, you start smelling like the wolves. And so it is in life. You start running with people who are world-minded, and you shall become world-minded yourself. So know what you desire in a friend, and let your desire be greater than your fear. What about dating? A lot of times teenagers are so afraid they're not going to get a date. It's not really because they want to go out with a certain girl or boy. It's because they don't want to stay home. They want everybody to know they got a little girlfriend or boyfriend. I can't imagine everybody knowing I don't have me a little boyfriend. All my friends have a little boyfriend. I don't have a boyfriend. I've got to have a boyfriend so that I can be like everybody else. I'm afraid of everybody thinking I can't get a boyfriend or I can't get a girlfriend. Why? Why are you afraid of that? When fear takes control, what you're going to do is settle. They got that commercial on TV on families of settlers. They just settle for things. If you are afraid like that, you're going to settle for any kind of a date. You're going to get the leftovers. You're going to get what nobody else wants. You're going to get what nobody else needs. You may want to have a little boyfriend or a little girlfriend, but you ought to know the kind of boyfriend or girlfriend you want to have. You want to have a girlfriend or boyfriend that's a Christian. You don't want to have a girlfriend or a boyfriend that's a member of a denomination. If they're a member of the Baptist church and you're a Christian, there's a possibility that they may roll you over to become a Baptist or any other religion for that sake. My wife married a man who was given to the Catholic Church. It wasn't a good idea on her part. Fortunately, it worked out okay. But it could have went the other way. And that's a very, very dangerous thing. It's not that we got anything against other people. We got nothing against other people. But it's about being who we are. It's about staying who we are. It's about dating those that we have things in common with. Otherwise, we may wind up with someone who's very, very different than we are. Imagine a happy family where the husband takes one kid and goes to his church, and the wife takes another kid and goes to her church. I worked with a man who told me that he married out of the faith and that he had a very successful marriage. And I asked him, where did his kids go to church? Well, they didn't go to church. They didn't want to hurt mama's feelings. They didn't want to hurt daddy's feelings. So they didn't do anything. You got to know what you want when you're going to date. What kind of a person do you want? What kind of a person do you want to be married to? Do you want to be married to a person that drinks? You know, marriage is a big step that people take. Well, a lot of times people say, well, I believe I can get him to quit. No, that's not true. You know, when you're dating, a boy is trying to win your heart. He's doing everything he has to do to make you like him. He'll try to make your daddy happy. He'll try to make your mommy happy. He'll do stuff he would never otherwise do. Because he's got one thing on his mind, and that is getting you. And he'll do whatever he has to do to get you. But he doesn't quit drinking. If he won't quit drinking, when he's courting you, what makes you think he's going to quit drinking once he's got you? You don't have to then. He's got a license. He's got a certificate. He knows who you are. He knows you don't believe in divorce. He can do whatever it is he chooses to do. What kind of a person would you want to be married to? That's the kind of a person you want to date. Do you want to be married to a person who fights all the time with people? There's a good chance that such a character is going to fight with you. Do you want to be married to a person who uses drugs? Do you want to be married to a person that you have to change in order to make them become what you want them to be? It won't happen. There was a girl one time thinking about marrying this guy. Well, she was my niece. And the guy she was going to marry, well, he was a goofball. I don't know what else to say. He was just a goofball. And without just telling her he was a goofball, well, I probably did. But I was trying to convince her not to marry this guy. And finally, I thought, let me ask you a question. You and him get married, and you've got two children, and you die. Yep. Do you trust him to pick a woman to raise your children? That was the end of that one. That marriage ended quickly. There was no way she wanted her children to be in that guy's care if she wasn't present. And you know, it's possible she might not be present. It's possible he might be choosing a mama for her children. Is this the kind of a fella you would trust to do that? These are questions we ought to think about. The flesh wants what it wants. The heart wants what it wants. But what does our mind tell us? Is this what we want? Is this what we need? What about our desire to please God? When our desire to please God is great, we will overcome our fears. As powerful emotion as fear is, desire is more powerful. Because love is more powerful. And when we want something the way we ought to want it, I'm talking about the good stuff. When we want something the way we ought to want it, we can overcome all those fears and do things that even surprise us. I worry a lot about our young people. What kind of a person are they going to marry? What's their life going to be like as they go on and are mature? Are they going to be happy? Are they going to be faithful as a Christian? Are they going to be married to someone that pulls them away from the Lord? There are so many fears that comes to our minds as we look at our children. And we try and we try and we try to educate them, to show them, to convince them that there is a right way to go about living. And it is the Lord's way. We follow His instructions. We follow His advice because He wants us to be successful. You want a boyfriend? The Lord knows you want a boyfriend. He knows how to bring you a boyfriend when it's time, when you're ready. He knows who you need. He knows what you need. Do you ever ask Him about it? About a spouse, about a friend? Do you ever talk to the Lord about the things that make you afraid? When your desire outdistances your fears, then you're on the highway to heaven. Don't do anything that would jeopardize your future. Think. And then do what you know is right.